Hello. 21st century has seen some major changes in the field of childbirth, in the field of prenatal sciences, in fact. It is the century that has just started, and the landscape is full of challenges, but also full of opportunities for the future of human life. Every second, approximately 4.4 human beings enter the world. In the year I was born, the act of birth meant largely what it had meant for millennia: pain, risk, hope, and the arrival of a new consciousness into a family and a community. Today, the picture is irreversibly changing. The forces of planetary degradation, social upheaval, technological revolution, and existential philosophy are converging at the very moment of life's beginning, at birth itself. The planet that once cradled us is increasingly becoming a hostile environment for the most vulnerable among us, the prenates. Every 1 degree Celsius increase in ambient temperature during pregnancy raises the risk of preterm birth by 4%, while heatwave exposure raises that risk by 26%. There are also significantly increased the odds of stillbirth, congenital anomalies, and gestational diabetes associated with high heat exposure. More insidiously, the very substance of modern life, plastic, is now inside us before we are born. A 2024 systematic review confirmed the presence of microplastics in the placenta and fetal body across 12 studies. The most common types: polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, have been detected in placental tissues, meconium, amniotic fluid, infant feces, and breast milk. A 2022 Italian study, microplastics were detected in the breast milk of 75% of healthy mothers sampled. Air pollution from fossil fuel combustion is strongly associated with preterm birth, low birth weight, and intrauterine growth restriction. It is very clear, and we have known that for almost a century, the placenta is not a passive filter, but the placenta is an active mediator, translating external conditions into developmental cues. Evidence linking air pollution, endocrine disruptors, and microplastics to alter the fetal growth and neurodevelopment confirms that the prenatal period is very sensitive to ecological conditions. The impacts accumulate across generations. The developmental origins of health and disease framework postulates that prenatal contamination exposures program lifelong health, meaning that today's contaminated pregnancies are programming the biology of future generations. What is more, a woman dies from pregnancy or childbirth-related complications every 2 minutes globally. As temperatures rise, particularly in low and middle-income countries, already bearing the highest burden of maternal mortality, the trajectory is deeply alarming. A 2024 overview of reviews in the Journal of Global Health found compelling evidence that climate mitigation policies would yield direct benefits to maternal and newborn health. We are the first generation to carry within pregnancy the full imprint of a planetary crisis. From this, one lesson emerges clearly. The beginning of life is not isolated within the maternal body, but embedded within a wider ecological field. Health can't be secured at the level of individual care alone. It is co-produced by environmental integrity. The trap is subtle yet pervasive. Reducing environmental risk to a checklist of exposures while maintaining the same extractive systems that generate them creates just a technocratic illusion of control. It is monitoring without transformation. And yes, we measure exposure, we monitor risk, but we rarely transform the conditions that create them. What remains to be learned is the necessity of shifting from mitigation to regeneration. The prenatal period reflects not only damage but also adaptive responses. However, chronic exposure may recalibrate these adaptations toward vulnerability. It remains to be learned that protecting the unborn requires more than care. It requires a different relationship with the earth. We have built a system that treats pregnancy as private, while the causes of harm are public. We ask the mother to adapt to conditions the world refuses to change. So we measure, we advise, we monitor, but we do not transform. And the future may depend on this shift, that the environmental policy becomes prenatal care. There is a second challenge. Our society is at crisis. Wars, poverty, violence, visible or invisible. In 2024, UNICEF declared the year as one of the worst years on record for children in conflict in UNICEF's history. More than 473 million children, almost 1 in 5 globally, live in areas affected by armed conflict. According to Save the Children's 2024 analysis, nearly 1 in 5 children born that year entered the world without a doctor, without a midwife or nurse present, and an estimated 24 million mothers gave birth without skilled attendants. In conflict zones, pregnant mothers are 3 times more likely to give birth without skilled care. A PLOS medical analysis of data from 181 countries between 2000 and 2019 found that wars were associated with an increase of 36.9 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births and 2.0 million excess infant deaths over the study period. The impact of a society at crisis on childbirth is not just physical. Intergenerational trauma begins in utero. Maternal stress, malnutrition, displacement, sexual or other violence alter fetal neurodevelopment, immune programming, and stress axis regulation. A Lancet review estimated that over 630 million women and children were affected by conflict globally in 2017 alone, with documented elevated rates of family violence and maternal depression. Globally, an estimated 2.4 million newborns die annually and 1.9 million are stillborn, the vast majority in low and middle income countries. Prenatal sciences tell us something difficult to ignore. Stress is not abstract. It becomes hormonal. It becomes neurological. It becomes part of the architecture of the developing human being. And the unborn does not wait for peace treaties to be signed. The lesson learned is that society is embodied before birth. Social instability is biologically embodied. The unborn child is not shielded from societal conditions. Rather, these conditions become part of their developmental environment. The trap is individualizing responsibility. Pregnant women, pregnant parents are often expected to buffer systemic stress without structural support, creating an impossible burden. We continue to ask mothers, fathers to compensate for what systems fail to provide. We individualize responsibility for what are in truth collective conditions. What remains insufficiently learned is that advancing health, preventing trauma, must occur upstream. Services and interventions, as we call them, after birth, while important, do not fully address prenatal imprints. Health advancement cannot begin after birth. It must begin before. The glitch is systemic invisibility. We organize economies, policies, and crises as if pregnancy were not happening within them, as if the unborn were not already affected. So responsibility collapses onto the individual, mainly onto the mother, while structural conditions remain untouched. The future may be shaped by policies, and that is an opportunity that can be seen. The future may be shaped by policies that recognize maternal care as peace-building infrastructure, as essential as water, as essential as shelter, as essential as peace itself. Supporting pregnancy in crisis settings becomes not just humanitarian, but intergenerational, transgenerational policy. Our century has seen new family formats. The normative family of the 20th century is being transformed. In the United States alone, a 2024 Williams Institute study found that 18% of LGBTQ plus people, approximately 2.57 million adults, are parenting children under the age of 18. Same-sex marriage is now recognized in 34 plus countries as of 2023. Reproductive technologies such as IVF, surrogacy, sperm donation, co-parenting arrangements are enabling previously impossible family constellations. Divorce, single parenthood, blended families, AI-assisted co-parenting platforms have diversified what family means at the moment of birth. As AI and the human technology interfaces increasingly penetrate intimate life, new questions arise about what it means to choose, quotation mark, a co-parent algorithmically or to use machine learning in mate selection. Prenatal sciences suggest that relational fields begin before birth. The prenate responds to maternal, paternal environment, emotional states, voice, patterns of interaction, forming early templates of relational expectation. Families are changing, forms shift, structures change, but before structure, there is relationship. Let's remember that the unborn responds to tone, rhythm, presence, attitudes, everything. The lesson learned is that connection precedes structure. The quality of relationships, rather than their form, plays a central role in every development. The trap is conflating change in family structures with developmental risk. The trap is confusing unfamiliarity with risk, which can lead to stigmatization rather than support. What is not fully learned is how to support these diverse family systems in cultivating coherent relational environments during pregnancy. The future may not ask, what is a family supposed to look like? But rather, what kind of relational field does this child enter? The future may involve expanding prenatal care to include relational education, supporting communication, emotional attunement, and stability across varied family forms. The future may belong to those who support their relational quality, not impose structural uniformity. But let's move on to another theme: space exploration, the humanity's most audacious reproductive frontier. We are preparing to leave Earth and live elsewhere, perhaps even reproduce. But development has always been Earth-shaped. Gravity, rhythm, biological timing, they are formative. NASA identifies in early 2026 5 hazards of spaceflight: space radiation, isolation and confinement, distance from Earth, altered gravity, and hostile environments. All 5 pose documented risks to reproductive health. Cosmic radiation causes DNA damage in reproductive organs and impairs oocyte quality. Microgravity disrupts hormonal regulation, delays blastocyst formation, and in a 2026 study from Adelaide University was found to cause human sperm to lose their navigational orientation, with live birth rates in microgravity exposed embryos less than half those under normal gravity. Prenatal sciences have established that gravity, circadian rhythms, maternal physiology contribute to embryonic development. Alterations in these conditions may affect cellular organization and developmental timing. Female astronauts exposed to the space environment may carry epigenetic changes linked to increased risk of small for gestational age fetuses in subsequent Earth pregnancies. The very aspiration of becoming a multiplanetary species rests on our ability to safely reproduce beyond Earth. Without it, any extraterrestrial settlement would be entirely dependent on resupply from Earth, a logistical impossibility over multi-year Mars missions. Female astronauts often delay childbearing until after multiple missions, with the mean age at first spaceflight now approximately 38 years, leading to common use of assisted reproductive technology. The lesson is that human development, as we know it, is Earth-adapted. Gestation has evolved within specific planetary parameters. Life is not context-free. And the trap? The trap is believing that technological reach equals biological readiness. The trap is technological optimism that assumes biological processes can be easily transferred across environments. What remains unlearned is the full extent of environmental dependency in early development. How deeply human development depends on conditions we take for granted. The glitch is technological overreach. We assume that because we can go, we are ready to begin life as we know it there. But biology has not signed that agreement. The future may not expand safely until we understand what cannot be removed from the conditions of beginning. The future may require redefining reproductive thresholds for space habitation, potentially limiting or carefully regulating reproduction beyond Earth until safety is established. The future may not simply be about expanding outward, but about understanding more deeply what makes life possible at all. In the 21st century, technology is at its greatest. Preimplantation genetic testing, already widely practiced in IVF clinics worldwide, allows embryos to be selected based on genetic characteristics before implantation. Prenatal whole genome sequencing can identify hundreds of conditions in the first trimester. Brain-computer interfaces are part of a broader technological culture that increasingly frames human biological processes as problems to be optimized. Every intervention to reduce the suffering is also potentially a choice about what kind of lives are worth bringing into existence. Yet the same technologies enable selection on the basis of characteristics, selection of sex, gender, genetic variants associated with disability, intelligence markers that cross into eugenics territory. The disability rights movement argues powerfully that selecting against impairment conveys that the lives of disabled people are less valuable. But who decides what is a disease and what is human diversity? Prenatal sciences reveal that variability and imperfection are integral to development. Epigenetic plasticity allows adaptation to diverse environments. We can now select embryos, screen them, shape them. The promise is powerful, but development is not a blueprint. It is a conversation. Variation is part of resilience. The trap is equating variation with defect. The pursuit of optimization risks narrowing the spectrum of human diversity. The quiet shift from healing to optimizing, from supporting to redesigning it is the trap. The lesson not learned is that resilience often arises from variability rather than uniformity. Unpredictability is not a flaw, but it is a condition of being alive. The glitch is a silent shift in intention from care to control, from healing to optimization. Without noticing, we redefine what is acceptable life. And in doing so, we risk narrowing humanity itself. However, there is an opportunity. The future may involve a shift from enhancement towards support, technologies that assist development without imposing rigid ideals. The future may depend on whether we use technology to support life. The future may belong not to those who perfect the human, but to those who protect human capacity to unfold. Our century can rewrite the code of new life. In November 2018, Chinese scientist He Yankui announced the birth of twin girls whose embryos he had edited using CRISPR-Cas9 to disable the CCR5 gene purportedly to confer HIV resistance. The international community at the time responded with near universal condemnation. The scientist was sent to prison. In 2023, the Third International Summit on Human Genome Editing reaffirmed that human germline editing remains unacceptable because safety, ethical, and governance standards have not been met. A 2025 systematic review in AGC Forum identified 6 major ethical themes: risk and harm, potential benefit, oversight, informed consent, justice and equity, and eugenics. In December 2023, the FDA approved the first CRISPR-based therapy, Casgevy, for sickle cell disease in somatic cells, a landmark achievement. If germline editing is ever permitted, the children born would carry those edits and pass them to their own children. A single editing decision made today could echo through all subsequent generations. Known technical risks include off-target mutations, mosaicism, and large-scale chromosomal abnormalities, all documented in human embryo experiments. From a justice perspective, germline editing would almost certainly be adopted disproportionately by those with resources, creating a genomic stratification of humanity and engineered biological inequality between those who can and those who cannot afford to edit their children's genes. We can edit genes, but genes do not act alone. They exist in systems, dynamic, responsive, interdependent. They are in dialogue with environment, with timing, with context. Editing genes does not occur in isolation, but within complex regulatory networks. The lesson learned is that complexity cannot be simplified without consequence. The lesson is humility Intervening at the genetic level carries unpredictable systemic effects. And the trap is reductionism, assuming that modifying a gene will produce a singular controllable outcome. The belief that one change leads to one outcome. What remains insufficiently learned is the importance of long-term multi-generational observation. What remains unlearned is humility in the face of complexity. Development is not linear. What we change today may echo for generations with unpredictable outcomes. The future may depend not on capability, but on restraint. The future may depend on strict ethical frameworks, limiting germline editing while expanding somatic therapies. The 21st century and the artificial womb, gestation without a body, is a reality. No more science fiction. They promise survival for the most vulnerable. And of course, this is not insignificant. In 2017, a team from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia maintained extremely premature fetal lumps alive for up to 4 weeks in an artificial uterine biobag with stable cardiac function and continued organ maturation. The technology has since received FDA breakthrough designation and is advancing toward first-in-human trials for infants of 22 to 25 weeks gestational age. In December 2025, through papers in Cell and Cell Stem Cell, described experiments creating womb-like environments in the lump to study early human embryo implantation, illuminating and alarming the scientific community. The benefits for extremely premature infants could be transformative. But artificial womb technology would alter the legal and moral meaning of viability, potentially reshaping abortion law globally. It could offer new reproductive options to those unable to gestate, but could also create new pressures on women to avoid pregnancy in favor of what might be marketed as a safer artificial alternative. As philosopher Susan Kennedy has argued, an optimal artificial womb might raise the question of whether a person who chooses biological pregnancy is making a selfish choice, potentially exposing them to legal and social coercion. Artificial wombs are emerging and they may save lives, and this matters. But gestation is not just growth. It is exchange, regulation, synchronization, rhythm, relationship. The trap is conceptualizing the womb as a replaceable container rather than a dynamic system. And what is not fully learned is how to replicate the complexity of maternal-fetal interaction. How much of development is co-created. The glitch is conceptual substitution. We risk replacing a dynamic relationship with a mechanical function, seeing the womb as a container rather than a living system. But that's not only this. Technology attends the birth. Robotic and AI-assisted systems are moving rapidly into perinatal care. AI algorithms can analyze cardiotocography patterns to detect fetal distress with accuracy matching or exceeding clinicians. Digital health platforms for prenatal monitoring, AI-driven risk stratification, and telemedicine are expanding access in low-resource settings. In settings with severe midwife and obstetrician shortages, where nearly 1 in 5 births occur without any skilled attendant, telemedicine and remote monitoring, yes, can save lives. The challenge is equity, safety, and preserving the human relationship at the heart of maternity care. The positive impact is real. AI diagnostic tools can help non-specialist health workers identify high-risk pregnancies earlier. Robotic precision in surgery reduces complications. Telemedicine expands access. The risks are equally real. Algorithmic bias, reduced the human connection, medicalization of normal birth, de-skilling of human clinicians, and the erosion of the midwife-mother-baby relationship, which evidence consistently shows is itself protective of outcomes. There are profound concerns about data privacy, consent, and commercialization of intimate health data from pregnancy. Prenatal sciences suggest that development is influenced by patterns, heartbeat rhythms, movement, biochemical signaling. Imagine gestation fully externalized, monitored by machines, managed by algorithms. Possible. The lesson is that life begins within a field of patent interaction, but the trap is over-automation, which may neglect subtle but critical developmental cues. The first pregnancy robots are expected to be on market and cheap to rent for almost something below $14,000. The trap is disembodiment. The risk is not only technical failure, but relational absence. What remains unlearned is how to encode relational complexity into technological systems, how to encode presence into systems. We remove the human field and assume that development remains unchanged, but absence is not neutral. The future may not depend on whether we can automate, but whether we understand what must remain human, what cannot be automated. induced pluripotent stem cells derived from adult cells can now be directed to differentiate into almost any cell type, including gametes. Stem cell modification can solve problems of sterility or inability to parenthood. In animal models, functional eggs and sperm have been generated from iPSCs and used to produce live offspring. In humans, research on deriving gametes from skin cells or stem cell lines is advancing, though not yet clinically available, or so it is said. Stem cell technologies could allow people who cannot produce viable gametes due to chemotherapy, genetic conditions, gender identity, or whatever, to have biologically related children. Prenatal correction of metabolic disorders before birth could prevent suffering, but the same technologies create the possibility of generating large numbers of gametes for screening and selection, potentially commodifying human reproduction at an industrial scale. As one review noted, combining stem cell lines with artificial womb technology raises serious ethical concerns and lays the groundwork for a paradigm shift in human reproduction. Stem cells, synthetic gametes, cloning. We are approaching the capacity to redesign the beginnings of life. But identity is not the genetic alone. It is shaped in context, in a relation, in time. Prenatal sciences highlight the continuity of development from conception onward, with early stages influencing later outcomes. The lesson learned is that early interventions carry long-term implications. Sameness does not produce sameness. The trap is assuming predictability. The illusion is that replication equals sameness. The trap is accelerating applications without sufficient longitudinal data. What is not fully learned is the systemic impact of altering developmental pathways. Its beginning is shaped by context, not just code. The glitch is determinism. The assumption that if we control the code, we control the outcome. But life does not unfold this way. The future may involve cautious, staged implementation, may deepen, not resolve, our understanding of what makes each human unique. Human reproductive cloning. Creating a human being genetically identical to an existing individual is banned now in most jurisdictions and broadly condemned in the scientific and bioethical community. No credible peer-reviewed evidence exists for any successful human clone. This does not mean that the work does not continue. The challenge is not primarily technical, it is ethical, existential, and legal. Why does cloning occupy our imagination so powerfully? Because it represents the most extreme form of the reproductive questions in all 10 themes raised. Who controls reproduction? What is the meaning of biological uniqueness? Can a child born as a copy of another have a genuinely autonomous identity? Animal cloning reveals the scale of risks. Cloned animals show high rates of developmental abnormalities, epigenetic dysregulation, premature aging, and immune dysfunction. Extending these findings to humans suggests reproductive cloning would expose any resulting child to a very high probability of severe medical harm. Beyond individual risk, human cloning would erode the principle that every human being is a unique, irreducible subject, not a copy, not an instrument, not property. The philosopher Hannah Arendt called this capacity for beginning something entirely new natality, the very essence of what it means to be born human. Prenatal sciences indicate that identity is shaped by both genetic and environmental factors. The lesson is that genetic sameness does not equate to identical development, and the trap is assuming predictability based on genetic duplication. What remains unlearned is how relational and environmental differences shape individuality. We have built a system that treats pregnancy as private while the causes of harm are public. We ask the mother to adapt to conditions the world refuses to change. We measure, we advise, we monitor, but we do not transform, and the future may depend on this shift. That environmental policy becomes prenatal care. The future may reframe cloning as a biological replication without identity replication, challenging deterministic views of the self. The threads running all themes that we talked about so far, the threads running through all of them are ultimately about interconnection. The microplastics in a baby's placenta came from the plastic in our water bottles. The child born in a bombed maternity hospital is connected to every arms trade deal. The embryo code edited with CRISPR is connected to every future generation that carries those edits. We are not separate from the systems that shape birth. We are those systems. And that means the call to action is not merely for specialists or governments, it is for every one of us. Our core ethical principles are few but significant. Beneficence and non-maleficence. Every reproductive intervention must be evaluated for its real potential benefit and harm to the child, to the gestating parent, to future generations, to society, to our planet. Reproductive choices belong to individuals, families, the planet. Autonomy must be genuine, not constrained by poverty, coercion, inadequate information. The benefits of reproductive technology must be available to all, not merely the privileged. The burdens of reproductive harm fall disproportionately on the world's most vulnerable, and that injustice must be named and resisted. Whatever else divides us, there is a minimum of respect owed to every human being, born and unborn, by virtue of their humanity, human dignity. No technology justifies treating a human life as a commodity, a product, or a proof of concept. Every child that enters the world, whether in a bombed maternity ward in Khartoum, in a high-tech fertility clinic in Copenhagen, in a biobag in Philadelphia, or in a future lunar habitat, arrives, as Hannah Arendt would have it, as something entirely new, a beginning that the world has never seen before. The challenges we face at the threshold of birth in the 21st century are not reason for despair. They are reason for seriousness, for the kind of moral seriousness that matches the gravity of what is at stake. We have within our grasp the power to save countless mothers and newborns who currently die needlessly. We have the power to remediate the environmental contamination of the earliest moments of life. We have the power to welcome all family forms with dignity. We have the power to govern our most transformative technologies with wisdom. Without wisdom, power is merely force. The call of this is not simply to do more. It is to do better, more justly, more humbly, more consciously, to ask before every intervention at the beginning of life, who is this for? Who will live with its consequences? What kind of world are we building for the one who is just beginning? Birth is not only a biological event, it is our species' oldest and most radical act of hope. Thank you.
My dearest two, who are also one, thank you for being who you truly are. I wish you really understood. I am an expert in what I do. I know my needs better than you. So please do not intervene. Stop trying to see. Your acts annoy me, and of course they distract. Step aside, my dear. Your needs are not mine. I am like you. I am not you. Your worries confuse me. They serve me not. So better stay in tune and in excellent mood. You are not alone. I feel it all. No time delay, so please bear in mind that we both decide. we